Welcome to a journey through 400 years of pure human ambition, immigration, tragedy, and relentless reinvention. And the craziest part? It's all stacked on top of each other, layer by layer, floor by floor. Today, we're unpacking the epic history of New York City's architecture, and we're going to transform the world's most famous skyline into an incredible timeline of innovation.
Have you ever stood on a New York street corner and just looked up? If you have, you already know that something is deeply unique about this place. You'll literally see a 19th century brownstone sharing a wall with the sleek modern condo or a Gothic stone church sitting right next to a gleaming glass tower. Every single block tells a totally different story. It's a city where history isn't just locked away in museums, it's quite literally holding up the sky.
To make sense of all this towering history, here's our roadmap. We're breaking this down into 6 historical leaps. We'll start with the foundations of a new city, hit brownstones and cast iron, check out the birth of the skyscraper, ride through Art Deco and the boom, look at modernism and preservation, and finally arrive at the super tall era.
Okay, let's start right at Section 1, Foundations of a New City, moving from Dutch wood to British stone. So our timeline actually kicks off way back in 1626. The Dutch set up a trading post called New Amsterdam on the southern tip of Manhattan, and they built these simple, highly vulnerable wooden structures packed really closely together. But after a series of devastating events, most notably the Great Fire of New York in 1835, which wiped out hundreds of buildings, the city had a massive wake-up call. They realized they had to build to last. Wood was out, permanent stone and brick were in. This directly paved the way for the British Georgian and Greek Revival styles. And this transformation happened fast. By 1842, Federal Hall was rebuilt in stone with clean columns and grand steps, sitting right on the exact site where George Washington was inaugurated. These early stone buildings were fiercely symmetrical, designed to project the authority and stability of a young nation, telling the world, hey, we are here to stay.
Moving into the 19th century, we arrive at Section 2, brownstones and cast iron, and how architecture urgently had to solve a massive population boom.
Picture this. It's 1825. The Erie Canal opens, and almost overnight, commerce and people just pour into the city. New York desperately needed housing, and the solution? The brownstone. Constructed from this warm, reddish-brown sandstone, these were actually built as super-efficient, middle-class row houses between 1840 and 1930. Now, they weren't originally luxury homes. They were mass-produced just to absorb the exploding urban population. Yet, with their carved facades, tall, narrow proportions, and those iconic front stoops, they absolutely became the undisputed visual identity of the quintessential New York neighborhood.
Now, right around the exact same time, down in the commercial districts, a structural revolution was taking place. Heavy stone walls going up against cast iron facades. See, before the mid-19th century, buildings could only be as tall as their load-bearing stone walls could support. This meant short, heavy structures with tiny little windows. But the invention of architectural cast iron changed the game completely. Cast iron allowed for thin metal columns that could hold up massive weight. That meant taller floors, massive windows, and incredibly elaborate ornamentation that could be mass-produced in iron at a fraction of the cost of carving stone. Seriously, if you walk down Green Street in Soho today, you are essentially walking through an 1870 time capsule of this exact architectural revolution.
This awesome materials revolution naturally brings us to Section 3, Birth of the Skyscraper, as engineers realized they could finally reach for the clouds.
Listen, skyscrapers didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were the result of a very specific technological chain reaction. Step 1 was that cast iron framework we just talked about, taking the building's weight off the outer walls. Step 2, and this was absolutely crucial, was the passenger elevator, invented by Elisha Otis in 1852. Because without it, tall buildings were completely useless, right? Nobody wants to walk up 20 flights of stairs. And step 3 was the mastery of the metal skeleton frame. Once a steel skeleton could carry all the weight, there was no logical limit to how high a building could go.
That innovation gave us the first generation of true skyscrapers, the early giants. Take the Flatiron Building in 1902, or the Woolworth Building in 1913. What's completely fascinating is the architectural style they chose for these behemoths. The 60-story Woolworth Building, nicknamed the Cathedral of Commerce, was the tallest in the world, built on a totally modern steel skeleton, but the architects covered it in Gothic Revival flying buttresses and gargoyles. They were ingeniously taking old-world, familiar decoration and slapping it onto completely unprecedented modern technology.
Well, that transitional phase didn't last too long, which takes us right into Section 4, Art Deco and the Boom. Welcome to the Roaring '20s.
During the 1920s, explosive stock market wealth meant developers were ruthlessly competing for the highest peaks. But the city had a huge problem. These massive, bulky towers were literally blocking out the sun. So they passed the 1916 zoning resolution. This law required tall buildings to step back as they rose, just to allow sunlight to reach the sidewalks below. Now, this legal requirement accidentally created New York's signature wedding cake silhouette. And it just so happens that this stepped, geometric shape was the absolute perfect canvas for the bold, glamorous machine-age style we know as Art Deco.
Now, you want to talk about some incredible human drama? Let's look at the Chrysler Building, completed in 1930. This is peak Art Deco. Auto executive Walter Chrysler and his architect actually assembled a 185-foot stainless steel spire in secret. They literally hid it inside the crown of the building as they were building it. Then, they hoisted it into place at the absolute last moment just to steal the title of world's tallest building from a rival tower on Wall Street. Complete with eagle gargoyles modeled on Chrysler hood ornaments, it is a total masterpiece of competitive ambition.
But honestly, the Chrysler Building only held that title for less than a year. Why? Because of one staggering number: 14. It took just 14 months to build the 102-story Empire State Building. Erected to claim the title in May 1931, it became the first building to ever surpass 100 floors. It perfectly symbolized New York's relentless speed and drive.
Following the massive boom of the 1920s and 30s, we arrive at Section 5, Modernism and Preservation, where the city shifts toward glass boxes and mourns some lost treasures. So, following a pivotal 1932 exhibition and the aftermath of World War II, the architectural mood shifted radically. Think about it. While Art Deco was super optimistic, heavily ornamented and glamorous, European modernist architects like Mies van der Rohe brought a completely different philosophy across the ocean. Post-war modernism was sober. It demanded that a building's structure be expressed honestly, with visible glass and steel. Decoration wasn't just seen as unnecessary anymore. It was literally rejected as dishonest. Van der Rohe's 1958 Seagram building perfectly embodies this. It's a simple, precise tower of dark glass and bronze that completely rejected the opulent past.
But you know, the embrace of the new came at a devastating cost to the old. In 1963, the magnificent Beaux Arts Pennsylvania Station was actually demolished just to make way for a modern arena and an office tower. As historian Lewis Mumford so powerfully put it, it was an act of irresponsible public vandalism. This shocking loss outraged the public so deeply that it directly resulted in the creation of the Landmarks Preservation Commission in 1965. Because Penn Station died, amazing places like Grand Central Terminal were saved for us to enjoy today.
By the 1970s, another reaction started brewing. Architects grew pretty tired of stark, modernist glass boxes and sparked the postmodern movement. This was a deliberate attempt to bring historical references, color, and even a bit of wit back into design. It sought to reconnect buildings meaningfully to human culture. A prime example is the controversial AT&T building, which is now the Sony building. It literally topped a glass skyscraper with a broken pediment that looks exactly like a Chippendale furniture cabinet. It was provocative, it totally divided opinions, and it reopened the debate on what buildings should actually mean to the people walking on the street.
And that brings us right into the 21st century with our final section, the super tall era, shaped by the rebuilding after 9/11 and the rise of Billionaires Row. The rebuilding of Lower Manhattan gave New York a chance to make a really profound statement, and it's perfectly encapsulated by this number, 1776. That is the exact height in feet of One World Trade Center, completed in 2014. It's a deliberate, powerful architectural reference to the year of American independence, proudly standing as the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere. Meanwhile, up in Midtown Manhattan, a completely new phenomenon was emerging, perfectly captured by the extreme slenderness of 43 Park Avenue. Completed in 2015 along what is now called Billionaires Row, this residential tower reaches a staggering height of 1,396 feet, but it sits on a base just 93 feet wide. This extreme slenderness ratio is an absolute engineering marvel, but it also neutrally reflects a major cultural shift. These towers represent a move away from the civic commerce that defined those early skyscrapers, shifting instead toward luxury, exclusivity, and the physical concentration of global wealth stacked high above the city's streets. But here's the real takeaway. When we step back and look at the big picture, the true essence of the city isn't any one specific building. It's the miracle of coexistence. You can walk down a single block and find an 1880 brownstone, a 1931 Art Deco office, and a 1960 modernist glass box standing right side by side. It is the physical manifestation of 4 centuries of history, ambition, and survival, all competing for your attention.
Ultimately, architecture isn't just about steel and stone, right? It's the story of us. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question to chew on. Which era of New York architecture is your personal favorite? And which building do you think tells the city's story best? Think about it the next time you find yourself on a busy street corner. And remember to just look up. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and keep learning.